So as part of this, after you get mission ready, you have to normally go through a what's called a certification, a nuclear strike certification. And again, you have to study up for this. You have to learn this. It's my first time going to this kind of mission. Although the 111 guys, if you were a 111 retread from Lakenheath, you'd have understood all of this. I didn't. So you got to study. You got to study the training, the comm, the authentication, and then you go in front of a board, which consists of every squadron commander, flying squadron commander on the base, and usually the group or the wing commander. And you and your pilot stand up there and you brief your training mission and you answer all the questions and you do your thing. And you don't want to bust it. I mean, really, the holy grail for strike is to actually find a way to get yourself excluded from ever doing nuclear ever again without actually negatively affecting your security clearance or your promotion potential. And nobody has ever figured that out. So it's like it's Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. That doesn't even account for all the brain cells that are still there because no 0% failure, 100% right. Some of that stuff is still occupying portions of my brain. So we get there, and where people get into trouble on a verification or certification is they freelance or they answer something that was not asked, but they go off the beaten path. And I remember being told a story of one bust where after the whole training line brief, one of the board members asks a Strike Eagle pilot, says, okay, you're intercepted. You're going up the Baltic. You're intercepted by a neutral fighter. Let's just say it's Sweden. How do you handle it? Well, there's procedures, for handling an intercept. And, they're going to tell you to divert. What are you going to do then? And his answer was, I'm going to tell them to get off my back or I'm going to drop the weapon on their country. Bang. Instant bust. History. I mean, why would you say something stupid like that? But that was part of the Lakenheath lore. And so I got the brief, and the brief is ask the question and only the question that is asked. So we go through the certification. Captain Hubbard was my pilot. And he and I do our thing. We brief. We get to the question and answer period. We're still kind of working through all the mission stuff. And one of the things you have to do is you have to decode an emergency action message. And the decoding procedures at the time were a nightmare. Do this, do that. We had little tabs called cookies. You have to break the cookie. You have to decode the cookie. I did not retain those brain cells. The only reason I even remember cookie is because it associates with one of my favorite food. Or biscuits. That's biscuits for you guys. Anyway, I mean, there's no blue guy on Sesame Street called the Biscuit Monster, so you should kind of have gotten the clue. Anyway, so the squadron commander from the Ops Support Squadron looks at me and says, all right, Captain Petruka, can you decode this message? And I look at him and I say, yes. And I don't say anything else. And the clock's ticking. And he's waiting, and the clock, because you've only got 1 hour. It only lasts for 1 hour, and I'm burning time right now. And finally he realizes that I had asked the question. I'd answered the question he had asked, and only the question that he had asked. The light comes on behind his eyes, and he goes, well, will you? It's like, sure. And so I decode the message. We do our thing. We get to the question and answer session at the end, and there's one last wild card waiting for me. And one of the other squadron commanders said, your squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Wood, has been bragging about your electronic warfare prowess. And so I've got an electronic warfare question for you. And immediately my pilot takes 3 steps to the right and disappears, off to the side of the briefing room, making it clear that he's got no part of this whole thing. And I'm standing there, okay, what's your question? And the questioner says, okay, so when you're talking about defining the edges of an antenna beam, you define the edges of the beam by what's called the half power point. He says, what's the signal strength of the half power point? I look at him, I say, minus 3 dB. Now, most of the audience isn't going to recognize what I've said because it's not an electronic warfare question. It's an electrical engineering program. And I flunked out of engineering by the end of my 3rd semester. But nevertheless, the guy felt that he'd asked me an electronic warfare question. I knew the thing, certification is over. And what I learned, one of the members of the board that I didn't mention is the wing EWO. Or if the wing EWO is not available, you grabbed any EWO. So you could fill your annual certification square by sitting on 6 boards where you made other people miserable. You logged it 6 times and that counted for you. So I'm an EWO, limited number of EWOs, and later the wing EWO, I never sat another certification for myself again. That was the only one I ever had to do. I've got my little nuclear qualification ribbon, which I've never worn. Um, and there we go. A couple of years of wasting sorties doing, nuclear delivery maneuvers and this and that in England on the training range or wherever else we happen to do it. Absolutely just to log the sorties. So, but, could have done it and didn't want to. Nuclear missions suck.
What did the ribbon look like? I didn't even know there was a ribbon for it.
I have no idea. I've never worn it. It's on my records. It was late. I mean, it didn't come around till the 2000s, and then you had to apply for it. You had to send a bunch of data in, and then they delayed the rollout. So I kind of forgot about it. The Air Force was going through their little schwanz dance on the ribbons, and there are a couple there that I'm missing that eventually I will get the Board of Military Records to correct, so that when I die and they entomb my ashes in a little Maxwell House jar with my ribbon rack, I'll at least have the correct ribbons.